What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. Today, we're going to be looking strictly at the early rounds, talking about the wide receivers I am most likely to draft over these first 4 or 5 rounds, and of course, taking ADP into consideration. Also, I have been over Brandon Ayuk a lot recently, so I'm not including him in this video, but you better believe he would have been included had I not talked about him recently. So we'll take a look at my list in a second. But of course, have to start things off as usual with the stat of the day. Yesterday's stat was 3 players had at least 50 full PPR points in a game last season. Alvin Kamara, Tyreek Hill were 2. I asked you who the third was, and the answer is Tyler Lockett. I don't know who's going to get it because I have to record this before the 4th of July weekend, but I will pin the winners in the comment section below. Today's stat, 4 players had at least 250 scrimmage yards in a game last season, but only 1 player did it twice. Who was it? All right, so one of my favorite wide receivers in the early rounds, again, taking ADP into consideration. We will start off with Calvin Ridley. I know he had the foot surgery this offseason, but that doesn't concern me at all. If he starts missing a bunch of time in camp, well then, yeah, I'd be worried. But that is not going to happen. It is very, very unlikely. He should be good to go right when camp's open, so don't be worried. And honestly, like, if I'm taking a wide receiver in this range, which is like roughly the early to mid second round, he's going usually closer to the mid second round, but I guess he could sneak up into the early second. If I'm taking someone there that is not a running back, basically, or not Travis Kelce, I need someone who has top overall wide receiver well within their range of outcomes. Because obviously everyone in the first 3 rounds, like, it's possible, right? If you're drafting a wide receiver first 3 rounds, you know it's possible they finish as the wide receiver 1 overall. But the path for a lot of the guys is still a little bit thin. You know, they're all safe. They all have a ton of upside. But if I am skipping out on elite wide receiver, I need someone who can push 20 plus fantasy points per game, since the opportunity cost is massive in skipping out on these early running backs. And to me, Calvin Ridley has the highest ceiling of any second round wide receiver. His average stat line without Julio Jones is 7.25 receptions for 107 yards and 3 touchdowns over 8 weeks. Again, touchdowns are random. He could easily see 12 to 15 total touchdowns this season. He's averaging also over 11 targets per game in those weeks, and he could easily push for 200 targets this season. Of course, we get that extra game, so it's a little bit easier to get to 200 now, but he could be the league leader easily in targets. And I brought this up when we did the individual breakdown on Calvin Ridley, but this is not a Juju situation, and I need everyone watching this video to understand that. Calvin Ridley has been dominant across the entire route tree and absolutely shreds man coverage as well as press coverage. Losing Julio Jones is not going to hurt him the same way losing Antonio Brown hurt Juju. Juju is a well below average route runner on basically every route that's not like a slant or a screen, and he has no ability to beat man coverage, no ability to beat press coverage. That's why we've seen, Diontae Johnson, now Chase Claypool, start breaking out on the outside, because Juju is just not capable of being a number 1. And that's why Juju did see such a drop-off when Antonio Brown left. That is not going to happen with Calvin Ridley. It would be a genuine shock to me if he finished outside the top 5 in points per game and wasn't just incredibly unlucky with touchdowns. Like, maybe he has a season where he only scores 2 or 3 touchdowns, just is super unlucky, and that's why he doesn't finish top 5 in points per game. But unless that happens, or unless he leaves like 3 different games early with an injury, he's going to be a top 5 receiver, and I truly believe he's going to have the best season of his career this season. All they have right now is Pitts as a rookie, Russell Gage, and then a rotation of Zacchaeus, Blake, or Zacchaeus. I don't remember how you say it, Zacchaeus or Zacchaeus, but whatever. Him, Blake, Sharp, like, just not good wide receivers. Even Gage, like, I know I talk about him in the later rounds because if he gets a lot of targets, if they pass the ball a lot, he could be the number 2, could see a lot of targets, but like, Russell Gage is still not that fantastic of a wide receiver, right? It is Calvin Ridley, Pitts, and a cliff, okay? And even you could say a cliff into Pitts because this is still his rookie season. So the targets are going to be monstrous The talent is absolutely there, and I truly think he can push, even if Rodgers stays in Green Bay. I think he can push Adams, he can push Tyreek Hill for that number one spot easily, and so he's the guy I would want to be taking in the second round if I'm missing out on these running backs. The next step on the list is Terry McLaurin, and notice the gap here. I'm going in order of ADP as of right now, and we're already talking about my wide receiver 13. I love a ton of the elite guys, but realistically, I am targeting running back and tight end early. And since this video is about my favorite early round wide receivers, the guys I want to end up with the most, it should be telling that we're already at my wide receiver 13. But back to McLaurin. You're going to see a theme, with the wide receivers that I've chosen for this video. They are young, elite route runners and are on offenses that I expect to be fantasy friendly. Those are three things I look for. Again, there's a high opportunity cost, not as high as there was with Calvin Ridley. For the rest of these people, it's a lot lower. But you're still in the first 5 rounds. So there's still a very high opportunity cost with every single pick. So I'm not taking a wide receiver that isn't in the prime of their career, isn't an exceptional route runner, isn't on a very good offense. I want all of those boxes checked, and it will be for every receiver that we talk about. But with McLaurin turning 26, easily a top 10 wide receiver talent. I don't know that everyone will agree with that, but it's really just because he's not a household name, right? I think over these next few seasons, people are going to be like, oh, like they're going to see him. Hopefully they play more on primetime games, but they're going to see this offense start to break out. They're going to see that, yes, Terry McLaurin is absolutely a top 10 wide receiver talent in the NFL. And I think at the end of the season, could he be top 5, top 7? Certainly possible. And this is a Washington team that, I've talked about being very excited about this season. Remember, my goal, it's not going to happen, but if I'm in a few leagues, my goal in every draft is to leave it with a Rams player and a member of the football team. That's what I would like to do. And if McLaurin is my player from the football team, then I'm going to be very, very excited about that. Over his first 2 years, he's posted stat lines of 58 for 919 and 7 touchdowns, followed by 87 receptions for a little over 1,100 yards and 4 touchdowns last season, with just truly horrendous quarterback play. Terry McLaurin is already elite, and he's going to be a superstar. This is not a speculative pick, someone that I feel could improve their game, might gel with Fitz. No, Terry McLaurin is going to be a superstar wide receiver, and I believe that starts this season. 97th percentile success rate versus man, 90th percentile success rate versus the press, one of the highest success rates in the league versus double coverage, and the fact that he even earned 75 receiving yards per game with Smith, Haskins, and Kyle Allen is incredible. This kid is special, and the ability to get him in the mid-third round is pretty awesome. He's another wide receiver like Calvin Ridley, where I'm really, really thinking about the ceiling. We've seen what he can do as part of a gross offense, because let's face it, I know the football team made the playoffs last season, but it was a gross offense. They got there really on the backs of their defense. But the moves they've made this offseason, adding Fitz, Samuel, Brown, along with the likely progression of Logan Thomas, because remember, that was really the first season he was used as a featured tight end, the likely explosion of Antonio Gibson, it makes this a very above average offense, and it makes it so that defenses can't just look at Terry McLaurin and be like, well, that's the only guy we're covering, right? Everyone else stinks. Not anymore. Now they have a good offense. They've got a good quarterback, and I'm very excited about this environment. And so especially the ability to take 2 running backs, or maybe a running back and a tight end to start, and then getting McLaurin as your 1. You've got to be very, very excited about the start to your draft if you start off like that. And realistically, after the 3rd round, running back certainty does drop off a cliff. We've got guys like Swift, Montgomery, Carson, Dobbins, Sanders, and maybe throw Josh Jacobs in there. But after that, there's a lot of iffy projecting that comes into play. So the optimal strategy this season clearly seems to be load up on running back early and then try and hit on some of these high upside wide receivers after that. So the fact that you can get, a wide receiver with this sort of upside after securing potentially 2 running back 1s, it's incredible. So if we're continuing, that trend, we're looking at guys who, after loading up on running back, who can we target that not only we know are going to be good, but that also have, top 5, top 7 wide receiver in the range of outcomes? Why not CeeDee Lamb? He comes off the board right after Swift, Dobbins, Carson, and I really don't think you can find someone that doesn't think Lamb is safe, doesn't think he's an elite wide receiver. Like, you can have a lot of different wide receivers where people have differing takes on their situation, their offense, their talent, but everyone thinks Lamb is elite. Everyone thinks the Cowboys are elite. So it's pretty incredible getting him where he's going. He probably is going to be, a second-round wide receiver next season. He was taken 17th overall by the Cowboys last year, and while he didn't end up posting like Justin Jefferson-type numbers, where Jefferson had like 1,400 receiving yards, he very well may have had Dak stayed healthy. But maybe that's just going to benefit us this season, since now Jefferson goes 5 spots ahead of Lamb. That gap would have shrunk if Dak had stayed healthy, and maybe Lamb would be going ahead of Jefferson. I mean, it's the better offense, right? It's the better quarterback, and people did think Lamb was the better talent, so it's definitely possible Lamb would have been going ahead of Jefferson had Dak stayed healthy. His final stat line last season, 74 for 935 and 5 touchdowns, but he actually saw the biggest drop-off in production post Dak Prescott, post his injury. His season-long pace with Dak was 93 for just under 1,400 yards and 6 touchdowns, but his season-long pace dropped to 65 receptions for 730 yards and 4 touchdowns once Dak was injured. And that difference is even more impressive when you consider that Dak was playing during the first 5 games of Lamb's career, right? I mean, you'd expect him to grow as a player throughout the season. So the fact that he was already posting elite numbers right out of the gates is incredibly encouraging. And if you look at Matt Harmon's charting in reception perception, it confirms everything. Elite at gaining separation, and showed that he can win on the outside, not only in the slot. And believe it or not, there are even more reasons to be optimistic, because he wasn't even a full-time player last season. He played in every game, but he was only in on 65% of their offensive plays. They used Cedric Wilson, Noah Brown in the slot at times ahead of him. I can promise you this season he's going to be very close to a full-time player. And given that, it only takes him 3 more points per game to be a wide receiver 1, with all of these factors going in his favor, I can't even imagine not wanting to get him on your roster just as many times as you can. Obviously, we don't want to load up. If you're in 4 leagues, you probably don't want to take any player in all 4. But man, if I was in 4 leagues and I faded CeeDee Lamb in every single one of them, I'd be very, very concerned. Massive upside. And the opportunity cost is not as high as taking someone in the first, in the second round, because of, like I said, you get to load up on some really, really nice players. The next wide receiver we'll go over today is Diontae Johnson. And I actually had to do a double take when I saw Johnson's ADP. Like, obviously I keep up with the ADPs, but I don't know. I just figured that he wasn't still going in the middle of the 5th round as the wide receiver 25. I mean, there is no defense for that. Like, he is most certainly not the 25th most valuable wide receiver in fantasy. I mean, I like some of these guys, but he's going a round later than Lockett, Kupp, half a round after Thielen, a few spots behind T. Higgins. Like, that feels ridiculous, right? I mean, I have Johnson as the wide receiver 19, and I have him listed as a core pick, which, of course, you can see at our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. But I have him as a core pick because there's basically no reason to fade him, no reason not to like him, and every reason in the world to draft him. His rookie season, final stat line, 59 for 680 and 5 touchdowns, posting an 80th percentile success rate versus man, zone, press, at least an 80th percentile in all of those. And then he follows that up with 88 receptions, 923 yards, 7 touchdowns through effectively, you could say, like 13 or 14 weeks because of injury. He improved on his success rate numbers, clearing the 95th percentile in man and zone. He cleared the 85th percentile versus the press. Like, he's already a star, and he's in his prime, just turning 25 the day before this video gets released. And just think about the volume for a second. 144 targets last season, again, through effectively like 13 or 14 weeks, since he only played 25 combined snaps in week 3 and 5 due to injury. That's combined between those 2 weeks. He finished 21st in points per game if you include those weeks when he was hurt. But, he only had 1 catch for -2 yards in those games. In the 12 games where he played at least half the snaps, he averaged 17.3 fantasy points per game and would have just beat out A.J. Brown for 7th last season. And how did he get there? Volume. Double-digit targets in 10 of the 12 games he played at least half the snaps. And it wasn't because he was the only weapon. There's a lot of talent on that roster, and there was last season. Volume is earned. A lot of people fall into the trap of thinking that guys are going to get 1 million targets because there's basically no one good on the offense. Think TJ Hawkinson this season. But targets are earned in the NFL. You still have to be getting open. You still have to be gaining separation. You're not just going to get a target when you're double covered because no one else is good. Someone's going to get the target, and it's not going to be the guy who isn't gaining separation. Diontae Johnson is one of the best wide receivers in the entire NFL at gaining separation, so these target numbers are going to continue. One thing people complain about is the drops, but please don't worry about that. I mentioned it in the breakdown video I did. What was it? Brandon Ayuk, Diontae Johnson, was it CeeDee Lamb? I believe that was the breakdown. I mentioned it because people would freak out if I didn't, but drops are very, very easily fixed, and they're going to happen when you get 1 million targets, right? And depending on what site you use, basically every site seems to have a different definition of what makes a drop, but depending on the site you use, he basically had the same drop rate as DK Metcalf and Tyreek Hill, and I have never once heard drops as a negative for those guys. The only issue for Diontae was that his drops were happening when they were playing in prime time. The issue is that not everyone watches every single game each week. They'll probably only watch 4 to 5 games. And so maybe you watch your team, you watch some of the 4 o'clock games, and then you tune in for the primetime games, Sunday night, Monday night. But realistically, Diontae, all of his drops seemed to come when they were in those primetime games. And so everyone saw them. And especially everyone was watching the game against Buffalo when he dropped a few passes and then got benched, so they think that just happened throughout the entire season. But even after that game, his targets were 13, 14, 4, and then 16. He's an elite wide receiver getting elite volume. It's okay that he drops a few passes, and again, that's fixable. He's an NFL wide receiver. You don't think that he was working on drops in the offseason? It'd be completely ridiculous if he wasn't. And we know for a fact that he is. So complaining that he has these drops, it's you know what? If you're going to promise me 160 targets this season, drop 20. I don't care. You're getting 160 targets. You're an elite talent. It's going to be a decent offense. And if they can push the ball even a little bit downfield this season, oh my goodness, the upside is incredible because he got all those targets, but they were very close to the line of scrimmage. They're very likely going to decrease the total targets this season, but also probably going to push the ball downfield more, which is more than going to make up for it. Because he's going to see fewer targets, but they're probably not all going to be 2 yards downfield. They're going to push the ball downfield a lot more this season, and that's a very, very good thing for Claypool and Diontae, and a bad thing for Juju. So, those are 4 wide receivers I would aggressively be targeting in the first 5 rounds this season. Of course, they might not all be available when you're on the clock, so if you want to see all the players I'd be targeting, along with their projections, values, risk grades, individual breakdowns, and a whole lot more, you can check that out at our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. That's the end of this one. Hope you all enjoy. If you did, then how about hitting that like button? And how about subscribing to the channel if you're new here? But thanks for watching.